Breaking news! A devastating image sweeps through the United States. Hundreds of farmers are destroying their own crops. The reason is as controversial as it is tragic. Donald Trump's new immigration rules have spread fear. Thousands of immigrant workers no longer show up to the fields for fear of raids, arrests, and deportations. The result is alarming. Fruits that will never reach the tables, vegetables uprooted, entire hectares of crops lost. But the most serious thing is what is not seen. If abandoned fields are not destroyed, they become filled with pests. Pests that not only ruin that land, but rather they spread and threaten neighboring crops. Therefore, desperate farmers prefer to burn or uproot their crops before allowing the contagion to spread. The consequences are already visible throughout the country: shortages in the markets, decrease in fruits, vegetables, and even flour, an increase in prices that directly hits families. Let me know what you think.
Have you guys heard about the crisis that Trump has created for American farmers? It's all over my For You feed. A lot of these farmers are about to lose their farms right now, and this is an alarming situation. This is directly related to Trump's policies, specifically the tariffs. He set the tariffs so high on China that they're no longer purchasing soybeans in the USA. Soybeans are the biggest export of farmers to China. And right now, China's not importing any of our soybeans. Now they're buying the soybeans from Brazil and Argentina. And get this, our taxpayer dollars. And what did Argentina do? They lowered the export rate on all of their soybeans to China so that they can sell them even cheaper. Now, if there's anything that pisses off conservative Republicans, it's our government funding another country and enabling them to outbid us on our products. A lot of our farmers are stuck with soybean crops that they can't even give away. Trump has promised to give them a subsidy, which kind of turns them into welfare recipients because they're taking a government handout because the government screwed them over to begin with. But these subsidies are going to be too little and too late for a lot of farmers who have already lost their farms. So it's no wonder that Donald Trump's latest approval rating has dropped to an all-time low of 37%. When I tell you that his own people are the ones that he needs to be scared of, I mean it. Farmers have overwhelmingly voted for Trump. You can call it karma, but it's nothing to celebrate because this is going to hit the American economy really hard.
Some great news for farmers. Their prayers and protests have finally been seen by the Trump administration, and now they're going to be saved. The ones in Argentina, that is. This week, Trump's Treasury Secretary announced a $20 billion economic support deal for Argentina. And right after that, Argentina suspended its export taxes on soybeans. The result? They sold 20 shiploads of soybeans to China in just 2 days. Meanwhile, in the US, farmers are harvesting in panic mode with no buyers in sight. China hasn't purchased U.S. soybeans since May. As Caleb Ragland, president of the American Soybean Association, put it, the frustration is overwhelming. I still don't understand what you and all the other Republican farmers are so frustrated about, Caleb. This is what you literally voted for. U.S. soybean prices are falling, and farmers read headlines not about a trade agreement with China, but that the U.S. government is extending $20 billion in economic support to Argentina. Well, unlucky for you, you're going to have to wait till the next Democratic president gets in. Trump is helping farmers, just not the ones in America. So much for America first.
Did you know Alberta cattle farmers just pulled off one of the biggest moves in Canadian beef history, and your media isn't telling you? They walked away from the Canadian Cattle Association and the National Checkoff System. Why? Because they were tired of sending millions of their hard-earned dollars to Ottawa and national organizations that weren't fighting for them. For years, Alberta ranchers have said the national groups are too cozy with government, too slow to act, and out of touch with what actually happens on the ground. They're watching family farms disappear, costs skyrocket, and trade deals cut against them, while bureaucrats and lobbyists cash the checks. So Alberta said enough. They're keeping their money right here, building their own grassroots group to defend ranchers, fight for fair prices, and make sure decisions aren't made 3,000 kilometers away in a boardroom. This isn't just about the cattle. This is about local control versus national overreach. Alberta beef farmers are taking back their voice. What do you think? Bold move for independence or risky split that could divide the industry? Let me know in the comments.
You know, I don't think it's really hit home the amount of damage that Donald Trump has done to our farmers. This is Old Texas Paul. Hope your coffee's as good as mine. Hell, I hope it's better. I really do. I hope you're having a good day and hope you're having a good cup of coffee. Yeah, I don't think people have, including our farmers, have really had it sink in yet what's happened. Other nations like Argentina and Brazil have all expanded their soybean production. There's no fixing this. Those markets aren't coming back. China is not coming back to us to buy the way they once did. This is permanently broken. And I honestly, I actually don't know that it's going to make a difference with farmers. Because I've never met anybody that was MAGA. I never met somebody that painted Trump on the side of their barn that didn't put that cult first, even over their farms. I really don't believe that they're going to come back to reality and do what needs to be done, which is to put Democrats back in power, to even remotely have a chance of recovering any of those markets.
You talk to America's farmers, they'll tell you these are tough times. A combination of high operating costs, low commodity prices, and lost markets has had devastating repercussions on the agriculture industry and the communities built around it. CBS's Lana Zach is in Davenport, Iowa tonight with new details on the growing crisis.
Farmers say this has been a perfect storm. They were already battling higher growing costs and crop disease, and now China, which had previously purchased half of all U.S. exports, has pulled out.
U.S. soybean farmers are starting their harvest, but they face steep losses that could fuel farm bankruptcies and foreclosures nationwide.
This is awful discouraging. You know, we do our very best to grow a good crop to feed the world, and then we can't hardly give it away.
Many growers say they feel betrayed. Last week, the Trump administration gave Argentina a financial lifeline, a $20 billion loan. But Argentina then cut the price of its own soy exports to China, undercutting U.S. farmers.
We don't do something. We're not going to have no family farms.
In Arkansas this month, hundreds of farmers packed into a church to plead for help from the government.
I'm in the worst shape right now that I've ever been in.
With prices for crops crashing, farmers are doing everything they can to stay viable, even selling off equipment. Joel's Tractors in Strawberry Point, Iowa saw a 30% jump in farm machinery up for auction this year.
Put a finger full of grease in there.
Keeping aging tractors running has Lawrence Christensen and his team working at full throttle.
The demand is stronger than the availability.
New equipment costs have increased by 60% in the last 8 years. John Deere, a U.S. manufacturing icon, says U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum will cost them $600 million this year. Over the past 2 years, the company has had to lay off 2,500 employees.
Majority of my family works here.
Gabriel Gomez was a proud Deere employee, following in the footsteps of his dad and uncles. Friday was his last day.
It's like a kick to the gut, right? When you're getting laid off after you've given 20 plus years to the company.
When you think about these tariffs and the ripple effects that they've had, do you think it's worth it?
You know, you hope that possibly in the long term they would be helpful. Currently here in the short term, no, it's really killing us. We were sold that we were going to do everything we could for the American workers, and we're seeing quite the opposite at this time.
President Trump says he will make it up to farmers, promising them some of the tariff revenue. But here in this area where John Deere is headquartered, the economic losses are hitting the entire community.
American farmers have destroyed themselves by voting for this Trump regime. Their hate for so many groups of people that they have learned to demonize allowed them to vote themselves out of business by voting for Donald Trump and today's MAGA Republicans. I don't know what else to say. We already know how the American soybean farmer was decimated this fall. China, their biggest customer, placed exactly 0 orders for soybeans from American farmers because of Donald Trump's regime's tariffs. They went to Brazil, We all saw the videos of the farmers crying in Arkansas, I believe it was. Please, Mr. President, we love you, but come save us. Oh, you guys, it just gets so much worse. So you know how our $20 billion in taxes, yours, Mr. Farmer, and mine, was just snatched from us and given to the leader of Argentina to help keep their version of Donald Trump in power? Your 20 billion and my 20 billion? This was screenshot on our Department of Treasury's cell phone from our Department of Agriculture. Ready? Finally, just a heads up, I'm getting more intel, but this is highly unfortunate, the text said. We bailed out Argentina yesterday, and in return, the Argentines are removing their export tariffs on grains, reducing their price, and sold a bunch of soybeans to China at a time when we would normally be selling to China. Soy prices are dropping further because of it. This gives China more leverage on us. And he responds, Besant responds, on a plane, Scott, but I'll call you when I land. You guys voted for this. The Democrats, who y'all hate so much, you've been programmed to hate your fellow neighbor, your family members. You guys voted for this. We warned all of you because we're not in a cult. We could see how these decisions affect businesses, affect our farmers. We were fighting for farmers, telling you don't vote for this, and you voted for this. Your tax dollars, this Trump administration just used to fuck you even further. Mr. Soybean Farmer and grains. This affects a lot of other farmers, not just soybean farmers. Anybody who harvests and sells grains to China. Here you go.
We have to talk about this soybean farmer situation. Yes, I am fully aware that 90% of farmers in America voted for Trump, but we still need to talk about the soybean farmer situation. America, Argentina, and Brazil are the biggest producers of soybeans in the world. America used to export a ton of soybeans to China until the tariffs hit, and now they have nowhere to sell these soybeans. Hence why soybean farmers are drowning and begging for help. China turned to Argentina to buy soybeans from. Argentina, in which is rumored to be getting a $20 billion bailout check from America. That's right. We are supposedly giving a $20 billion bailout check to the country that's putting our farmers out of business. Trump announced today that he will be meeting with Xi in the middle of November to discuss soybeans. And he says they will talk about the soybean situation. However, it really won't matter because by the time he talks to Xi, Brazil will be in the mix. Brazil's soybean crops come in December, so that doesn't really help our farmers. Some of these soybean farmers are looking to get into the canola oil business, but they can't fill out the paperwork because the government is shut down. It's almost coming off like America isn't first in this administration, and it's almost like they are setting these farmers up to fail on purpose so corporations and other countries can come in and buy the farmland at very cheap value. And that is why I think this soybean farmer situation should be shared. It is much more than just farmers needing a bailout. It's a whole slew of anything but America first.
Another fuck around and find out moment. This one, Arkansas farmers. Yep, Arkansas farmers who voted overwhelmingly for President Trump. Well, here's a quote from one of those Arkansas farmers, and I'm going to do it in my best Arkansas accent. Right now, we're in a very dire situation. September is upon us. Harvest is starting in the deep south, and we have 0 bushels of soybeans on the books to be sold to China. Yeah, no shit. You voted for the tariff guy. And now Arkansas farmers want a handout. They want federal assistance. This poor ass red state that votes Republican every freaking year They want a handout. You damn socialists. I guess you're finding out that racism sure is expansive, huh? Fucking dumbasses.
Okay, if you're a farmer or a rancher or you live in rural America, you need to listen to this. Because Republicans want to make your health insurance completely unaffordable. So here's what's happening. At the end of this year, as you all know, the ACA premium tax credits are expiring, and Republicans desperately want to allow them to expire. And more than anybody else, rural Americans are going to get absolutely crushed. More than a quarter of farmers and ranchers get their health insurance through the ACA marketplace. That's because most family farms and small agricultural businesses don't offer employer coverage. And nearly all of these Americans depend on those subsidies to afford their health insurance. Now, you probably know already that when these tax credits expire, which they will if Republicans have their way, premiums are going to go up by minimum 75% nationwide. But for rural Americans, it will be a 107% average increase. That's more than double what you're paying now. Let's give you some real world numbers. A 60-year-old couple making $82,000 a year would see their monthly premium jump from $581 to $1,800 a month. That is over a 200% increase. One farmer from Iowa, Nick Larson, calculated that his family will realize an immediate tax increase of at least $3,000 a year, maybe up to $50,000 a year. Lori Hunt, who is a 53-year-old breast cancer survivor, also from Iowa, said that her premiums would go from $8 a month to $650 a month. That's more than her mortgage, and she says she simply could not afford it. She'd have to simply cancel it. A breast cancer survivor. In fact, if Republicans allow these credits to expire, nearly 4 million Americans will lose their coverage because they simply can't afford it. Think about what this means for farming communities who are working in physically demanding, high-risk conditions. Health coverage isn't a luxury. It's what enables you to keep your farm running. And yet, here we are. Conservative leaders are urging Trump to let these healthcare tax credits expire. And Trump is all for that, and also all for sending $20 billion to Argentina, because I guess they need it more than us. Anyway, remember when your health insurance bill doubles in January that Republicans chose Argentina and billionaires over the farmers who feed this country. So much for America, or Americans first.
Farmers are making a cry for help before it's too late. Countless farmers gathered to speak to representatives of Arkansas leaders to share the urgency.
Last year we sent around $12 billion, I think $14 billion worth of soybeans the year before. For the first time in 20 years, China's bought zero soybeans and zero new crop corn out of this country.
MAGA farmers seem to be facing a pressing reality. The policies they once supported and their trust in political decisions now appear to be directly reflecting on their livelihoods. Have you ever imagined that a decision from Washington combined with a reaction from Beijing could cause soybean prices to plummet, put families under financial strain, and even jeopardize the future of farming for the next generation? Let's take a closer look at what is truly happening to MAGA farmers, and whether the story might reveal something about the nature of the policies they once trusted. In recent years, it seems that the trade war between the US and China has created direct consequences that many ordinary people might not have anticipated, particularly for American soybean farmers. It appears that China, in response to the high tariffs imposed by the US, decided to halt imports of American soybeans. This policy seems to be not only an economic measure, but also a political move, aimed at putting pressure on Washington. In this context, American farmers suddenly found their livelihoods threatened. Perhaps the most notable point is the scale of dependence on the Chinese market. Before the retaliatory measures were implemented, around 60% of Iowa's soybean production, the largest production hub in the US, was typically exported to China. This market seems to have been an essential pillar for the American agricultural industry, and when it was closed, the economic consequences became apparent. US soybean prices, according to recent reports, appear to have dropped significantly, from about $9 per bushel to nearly $7, directly pressuring farm profits. Many farms had to sell their crops at prices lower than production costs just to avoid spoilage. Some chose to store their harvest, but rising storage costs directly affected cash flow and financial planning. Perhaps even more concerning is that smaller farms or multi-generational farming families seem to face the risk of bankruptcy if no relief measures or new export opportunities emerge. The impact doesn't seem to stop at the economic level. This financial pressure appears to be spreading into family life, affecting educational plans, children's futures, and other long-term goals. Here are what people have to say about the whole situation. American farmers are now working farmers. Most are millionaires who voted for tax cuts. They are waiting for the Go VT handout Trump will give right before the 2026 midterm elections to keep them loyal. They voted for this. As a Canadian, I can't wait to see America fall flat on its face after Trump managed to politicize absolutely everything. Sports are supposed to be about fair play and enjoyment, not about threats against athletes and even their families. Shame on you, America. Maybe it's time Canada reconsiders its sporting ties with the US altogether. Should we boycott them, even in hockey? Perhaps we'd be better off competing with Europe, where there's at least some sense of maturity and respect for the game. Once again, shame on you, USA. Elbows up, fists ready, because respect clearly isn't part of your playbook. Funny thing is, Trump bailed out Argentina with $30 billion in aid, and then Argentina turns around and sells a whole pile of soybeans to China, while US soybean farmers can't sell theirs to anyone. Ha ha ha, man, from Arkansas here. I actually know some of these farmers. Went to school with them, seen their kids grow up. Most of them voted for Trump because they figured if he messed up, he would give them a bailout. I am wondering how responsible the US farmers are and how responsible their parents and the school system was. I went to an elementary school where the teacher was teaching 6th grades and immigrant children who were learning English along with their coursework. The US has failed the poor in their country, and democracy depends on an educated populace. Therefore, democracy is under threat in the USA. The exceptional thing about the US used to be that the country was stable and economically strong for 80 years. Take away the stability, and they are struggling for economic power with everyone else. Trump's 2 terms lost the US the trust that the markets had in them, and that cannot be restored so easily. Even if Trump is gone, the MAGAs are still there. Another MAGA candidate could easily be elected again later. Do you agree with them? Rural communities in the US, long tightly knit and interdependent, seem to be experiencing new tensions and conflicts. Trust in leadership and economic policy appears to be declining, while global markets seem to be redistributing. Brazil and Argentina quickly filled the gap, creating long-term competitive pressure for American farmers. It appears that China's halt on US soybean imports has caused a wide range of impacts, from losing export markets, financial losses, to the risk of farm closures. At the same time, this event seems to highlight the close link between trade policies and the real-life experiences of farmers. And this leads us to the real-life stories of MAGA farmers, those who are experiencing the emotional and social consequences directly from policies they once supported. It seems that across the vast fields of Iowa, Missouri, and the Midwest, many farmers are facing an almost unbelievable reality. Their livelihoods appear to be threatened by the very policies they once supported. These farmers, many from multi-generational farming families, seem to view soybean cultivation.
Remember when President Donald Trump said the tariffs are going to be eliminating the federal income tax and all this extra money is going to start flowing to Americans? Well, now he wants to use that money for the farmers. This tariff money, he wants to make sure that he can give it out to the farmers because they're hurting right now. You still waiting on that DOGE check too? I'm curious because everything President Donald Trump has said, it's not happening. Only the mean stuff is, which his base like all that. Because remember, it doesn't matter that it's hurting them. Well, it is in a way. They just didn't necessarily 100% expect it. What matters to them is when they voted because they were told it was going to hurt somebody else that didn't look like them, talk like them, work like them, do things the way they do things, pray like them. I can go on and on, couldn't I? Let me know if you're still waiting on your Doge check or when them American Relief tariff funds start flowing. Ha! I guess the farmers would be happy, though. Support the American farmer. Bye.
Farmers across the United States are warning the Trump administration and, of course, Republicans in Congress, if you do not help us, if you do not reverse these policies that are currently killing us, you're going to face the consequences, electorally, obviously. Now, here's the problem. Farmers in the United States overwhelmingly vote for Republicans. In fact, in 2024, a vast majority of them voted for Donald Trump. And they did that knowing damn well what he did to them during his first term with the tariffs, when the number of bankruptcies among farmers skyrocketed to a record high. And that was because of his tariffs. So they lived through 4 years of it. A lot of them went bankrupt. They knew how bad he was. They heard his campaign promises that he was going to do the same thing to a much bigger degree, and they voted for him anyway. Now, typically, when describing a group of voters in this manner, this is where I say I have no sympathy for them. Unfortunately for the farmers, I actually do have to have sympathy for them because their struggles translate to higher prices for all of us. So it's not like they're suffering in isolation. Their suffering spreads all over across the country to every single person. So kind of difficult to say, haha, you deserve this, when we're all collectively being punished for their stupid voting habits. But I'm not going to be nice to them, and I'm not going to feel sympathy for them. I'm not going to say they deserve it, but by God, I'm not going to feel bad for them. So here's the story. Here's what's happening. We got farmers across the country. Multiple articles have come out in just the last week about how they're being devastated by Donald Trump's tariffs. Specifically with regard to China. Obviously, China is now boycotting buying American soybeans because of Donald Trump's trade war. China is the largest single purchaser of soybeans here in the United States. Soybean farmers are going under. They're warning right now that 25% of soybean farmers could find themselves losing their farms, going full bankrupt if this continues. Let me read you this. This is from a farmer in Kentucky. He said, "We depend on the Chinese market. The reason we depend so much on this market is China consumes 61% of soybeans produced worldwide. It's a 5-alarm fire for our industry. That 25% of our total sales is currently missing. And right now, we're not competitive with Brazil due to the retaliatory tariffs that are in place. Our prices are about 20% higher, and that means that the Chinese are going elsewhere because they can find a better value. There's an artificial barrier that is built with these tariffs that makes us not be competitive." Another farmer had this to say. "It started off really good this year. We were in the field in late March, which is early for us, but then the wheels came off, so to speak, pretty quick." And of course, this farmer is in an area of the country that had massive flooding in April. Then, of course, they had a drier than usual summer. And he says, "So much of what has happened and what's going on here is totally out of our control. We just want a free, fair, and open market where we can sell our goods as competitively as anybody else around the world. And we do feel that we produce a superior product here in the United States, and we just need to have the markets." And then he went on to say that farmers have done everything right. They've managed their finances well. They have put in a good crop, but they cannot change the weather. They cannot change the economy. They cannot change the markets. The weather is in the control of a higher power, and the economy and the markets are in control of Washington, D.C. Do you see the contradiction in your own statement? We can't control the economy or the markets. Those are controlled by Washington, D.C. Who controls Washington, D.C., bud? Who is it? Who is it? It's the party you voted for. We can't change D.C. Yes, you can. But you have to change in order to change D.C. At some point, and I've been doing it for a while, but at some point, everybody else is going to have to get on board to say, you know what, the voters do deserve a share of this blame. Especially when they're out there saying it's out of our control because the politicians control it. Who puts the politicians in power, guy? Who does it? You do. You pick these people. Maybe you voted Democrat. I'm willing to bet based on where you're located, you didn't. But you probably voted for these people. Your neighbor farmers probably voted for these people too. And while y'all sit around, obviously, rightfully upset about the fact that you could lose your entire livelihood, do you ever once stop to think that maybe it's your goddamn voting habits that did it? Do you? Does that thought cross your mind? Because if it doesn't, then get used to what's happening now. Because if you can't change, then you can't change what happens up there. You have to be a part of it. You have to change those voting habits. You have to wise up. You have to stop falling for the BS. You have to stop voting for people because they say they're going to get transgender people out of sports. Stop being fooled. Stop being hoodwinked. Stop being an uneducated voter. The information is readily available out there. Stop hurting yourself because you're voting to hurt others. How about that? Because that's what they're doing. These are people who fall for culture war issues. Like, we can't teach critical race theory. Teachers are indoctrinating kids. Transgender people are in the bathrooms. I don't want these people to have things. I'm voting to hurt them. And those people do get hurt. But you know what? You're actually getting hurt worse than them right now. But you voted to harm other people. So you know what? I don't have sympathy for you. Yeah, I know it sucks, and we're all going to be impacted by this. But you voted to hurt other people. You just didn't think, as the saying goes, the leopards would eat your face.
Y'all, in today's episode of As the White Hood Turns. So, you remember last week when Syphilitic Sid was over there at the UN? Mm-hmm. Well, apparently, video has surfaced of world leaders making fun of Syphilitic Sid. So you know how he'd been bragging about how he's de-escalated and stopped all these wars. Well, apparently he got up there and said that he had stopped a war between Albania and Azerbaijan. And the president or prime minister or whoever of Albania was like, wow, I didn't know we were at war. He said he stopped a war. That never happened. And so they were overheard joking about why nobody congratulated him on stopping the war between Albania and Azerbaijan. Now, I'm laughing, y'all. I'm laughing. But I'm also terrified because this is where we are. We have a president that the world is literally laughing at. But the sad part is he gets up there and he says this bullshit and the maggots actually believe him, because I was arguing with this lady over on Threads and she was like, well, he stopped 7 wars. Where? Because the wars he's talking about, he done ended. Never. Okay, they happened.